And you've just heard Berkeley Street, which is the opening track on Adam Ross's new album, Bring On the Apathy. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Adam now. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm really well. I'm really well. And before we get stuck into the album, what can you tell us about Berkeley Street, the song we've just heard?
Yeah, it's kind of a nostalgic song looking back on a period of my life where I lived in Glasgow. I lived on Berkeley Street for a year and a half, but I was mostly in the kind of Partick area when I lived in Glasgow. And yeah, the lyrics, they're kind of a mishmash of lots of different half memories
Mm.
and uh, yeah, yeah, it was inspired by a trip I had to Glasgow a year or two ago, and it was wandering around some of the areas where I used to live, and yes, getting a wee bit nostalgic.
Yeah, it's got that lovely feel to it. There's some lovely little, you say memories, but they're almost small memories that, stick with you, which is often the case.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, which was partly because, as memories fade, you start to lose grasp of the details, but also I didn't want it to be too direct or too specific about any individuals.
Yeah. For people who don't know the geography of Glasgow, Berkeley Street, that's the one that kind of runs from the Mitchell to Finnieston, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Uh, I lived on the corner of where it overlooks Argyle Street in Finnieston. It was a nice spot.
And it was a single from the album.
Yeah, it was. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So do singles kind of reveal themselves readily, or do you have to really consider what's going to kind of represent the album, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a good question. Sometimes you go into making an album thinking, oh, I think this one might be a single, and then it often does pan out that way, but sometimes doesn't pan out that way. Um, yeah, we chose that as the first single, because I think I for some reason I've always fallen into the habit of releasing the opening track of an album as the first single. We did it
Right.
with Literal Zone, Free Will was the opening track from that album. I think with the last Randall Sleep record, Moment Past was the first single that came out. And I don't know, I think in the kind of current climate of how people hear music, thankfully lots of people still buy records and CDs, but with singles,
Yeah.
most people are listening to them digitally. So I think it's kind of nice that the first thing they hear is that first little moment in the album, and then it builds from there. Um, yeah, and I felt like Berkeley Street kind of showcased what makes this album what it is in terms of like the analog recording techniques we used and the big vocal harmonies that we worked on as well.
And you also made a fantastic video for it, which also works as a kind of introduction to the band too. Talk to us a
It's
little bit
a,
about making the video, which was all shot in and around the West End of Glasgow.
yes, yeah, I worked with a fantastic filmmaker um, called Beth, and we were chatting about it for a while, and we started out with quite a vague idea. I had like the kind of origins of the song. I was sort of writing it as if I was a ghost that was coming back to haunt the West End of Glasgow. So we thought we'll take that as a jumping off point for the video. And it's not a particularly heavily scripted video. It's relatively abstract, just lots of nice shots of Glasgow, but I'm, as you say, in makeup, um, slightly ghostly, skeletal kind of makeup. And yeah, thankfully, a bunch of the people who are on the record managed to turn up and be in the video as well. We nearly had to cancel it. There was a pretty big storm that week, and the night before it was looking pretty dicey. But we went ahead. We got soaked for the first hour. There's some shots under umbrellas where uh, everyone got pretty soggy, but then actually it cleared up after that. So I think it was the right choice
Yeah,
to go ahead
there's one shot where your umbrella is threatening to take off.
with.
And it's, when did you shoot it? What time of day? Because it's either brilliantly edited, I'm sure it is, but there's hardly any people around.
That's right, actually. No, it was middle of the afternoon, really. We started maybe about midday and then or 11 a.m. and then worked through
Okay.
until it was getting
Ah.
starting to get dark. So yeah. But yeah, hats off to Beth Chalmers. She just project managed the whole thing and made it run really slickly. And yeah, she's great.
And as I say, it works really well as a kind of introduction to the band. Are they all on the album? The people that we see in the video?
Yeah, that's right. I think who couldn't make it? Pete, the piano player, couldn't make the video. Neither could Chris C. Duncan,
Yeah.
who's on the record. He sings on it and he wrote the vocal arrangements as well, which were performed by Chris and Jill Fleetwood, who's in the video, and Amanda Nizic, who's also in the video. And then Pedro, fiddle player, Cami, bass player, and Owen, the drummer, are all
Yeah.
in the video as well.
Yeah, all you looking as you're having a great time. I really recommend it to people to go. It's on YouTube at the moment, the video. And did you get any comments at all? Because you were on the underground, you were in a tippy.
Nah, that thing. Like, few people, like my mum, my mother-in-law, they were like, "Oh, were people not stopping to stare at you and asking?" Like, nobody cares. I think I was probably one of the least weird things that people had seen on the Glasgow subway network that day.
That's very true. That is very true. Um, Talking about the album, what does the title refer to?
Yeah, bring on the apathy. It's a couple of things. Like, I guess as a society at the moment, I feel there's a lot of apathy around. Um, for kind of obvious reasons, I suppose. But yeah, I feel like people are a bit kind of jaded and a bit fed up. So it was partly a nod to that, but also on a more micro and personal scale, even working as an independent musician, you sometimes, feel like you're fighting against a tide of apathy. You know, Trying to put music out into the world and make progress and sell records and play gigs and sell tickets, it can sometimes feel like you're fighting against apathy. Um, but the title was about just kind of acknowledging that it's a reality that is here
Yeah.
and trying to get some power over it, some control over it, some acceptance, and trying to kind of protect myself before I went into another album campaign. Like, I probably won't get much sympathy for this, but it can be quite a sort of exhausting and emotionally bruising experience sometimes. And even at the point of, like, I love making
Yeah,
records. I
for
love
sure.
being in the studio, working with people. But even like we were kind of nearing completion of the album, that thought of, oh no, I need to get back on the treadmill and
Mm.
start, promoting and marketing the album was quite daunting and I didn't feel quite ready for it. So that's partly what the title's about is like getting to that point of okay, I'm ready, bring it on, and trying to be less fragile, shall we say, about how it's received.
But there's so many people that I speak to that they love making music, they love collaborating with other people, being in the studio or however they choose to record. But actually, yeah, the changes in how you've got to almost relentlessly promote and campaign's an interesting word for it because it must feel like that at times.
Yeah, yeah, I guess that's industry speak, but yeah, when you actually think about that word, it's quite like a military campaign. And it's funny, like when you're making when you're promoting a record, particularly with social media, like you can feel like you're just banging on about the same thing relentlessly. And I start to think this is going to annoy people.
Mm.
Like people are going to get really fed up just hearing me go on and on about this record or this single or this tour. But then you bump into people in real life and they're like, oh, I had no idea you had a new record out, or I had no idea you were playing like just down the street from where I live. And it's like
How,
the
yeah,
information isn't always actually reaching people. So,
yeah, and that's the thing that's not under your control. It used to be, say,
mhm.
with whether it was email or people had to visit a website. you were getting some kind of one-to-one connection. But now, if you're at the behest of algorithms and all those kind of things, which I do not understand, but they may not be targeting the people that are Adam Ross
Yeah. No,
fans.
totally, totally. And I think someone told me that like the algorithm, if someone that follows you like really interacts with your stuff in terms of liking and commenting and stuff, then the algorithm will learn and will continue to show them more from that person. But I think my problem is that I think a lot of my fans are very like anti-social media and hate to engage with posts. Like if you're lucky, you'll get a like, but like going out, sticking your neck out there and actually posting a comment. Because I'm the same. I
Yeah.
hate like saying anything. Obviously, I have to do it for my own music, but in terms of interacting with other people, I'm really bad at doing that stuff. So I'm trying to get better at actually like directly engaging with the stuff that I like in the hope that it'll
Mm.
show me more of that. But no, you're right. And even like, email mailing lists, a lot of people, a lot of musicians say, well, that's the remedy to social media. Get your mailing list, and then it's a direct channel to your audience, which I agree with to a point.
Yeah.
But the problem is you can dig into the stats on mailing lists as well, and it'll be like, congratulations, this email was opened by 27% of subscribers. It's
Yeah,
just
I
going into
know.
people's junk mail folders. And
It's
yeah.
absolutely right. And I do it myself. You think, okay, I've seen from, I say it's a label. Say, yeah, well, I'll look at that later, and actually, you very rarely do.
Aye.
Let's get back to the things that you do enjoy. How was the album made? You kind of hinted that they're kind of analog. I mean, it's got a real warm feel to it. I think that comes across, in the sound and yeah, I'm interested in how you made it. Was it all done in studio or?
Yeah, it was. We worked in a studio called Green Door Studio. It's located on the Hidden Lane in
Yeah,
Finnieston, so a stone's throw away from that flat on Berkeley Street where I used to live. Um, and yeah, it's an analog studio, so we recorded it onto reel-to-reel tape machines. Um, we did all the core recording live, so I was in the room singing and playing guitar live with the drums, the bass, and the piano. So no metronomes, no click tracks. A certain uh, lack of the ability to kind of correct mistakes and things when you're playing live and with tape. It's less forgiving than
hmm,
digital when it comes to editing. But that wasn't really an issue because I was working with really great musicians who rarely make mistakes. Um, Me, on the other hand, not so much. Um, so yeah, and I think that's where so much of that warmth comes from. I hear it particularly on the drums, like recording drums onto tape. It's a different sound. Like you can hear the depth of sound. I feel like you can hear more like the fact it's a wooden stick hitting a membrane skin on a drum, and yeah, it's just got a not a Christmas, a crispness to it that I don't think is so easy to capture digitally. And I
yeah,
think particularly nowadays, um, a lot of drums you hear on records aren't even played live. There's a lot of like drum libraries and kind of MIDI generated drums, which can sound amazing, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve and the genre of music and whatever. But what I was looking for specifically with this record was something that felt more human. And you can kind of hear the room as well. There's an atmosphere that I think has managed to transfer onto tape by doing it that way. And I don't want to go back onto chatting about like the digital world and all that stuff, but there's a lot of changes happening right now in terms of like AI and stuff that I'm just not interested in,
mm,
and I think there at times I feel like production styles and a lot of music there's a sort of sound that is quite ubiquitous, and I wanted to try and do something that that maybe didn't sound like what a lot of other people were doing at the moment. Like it's not novel or unique.
No.
People have been making records this way for a long time, but also that was part of it. Like a lot of my influences are, from the 60s and 70s, and I was just really excited to try and make a record in that style that kind of captures that feel.
If anyone's wondering, oh, what the heck are they talking about, Warmth and everything, listen to the album because it really on the first listen, it really came across to me. It felt this sounds like people playing together for one, and that it's almost as live.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And there's sometimes a risk there that if you do things that are too live, it doesn't sound like a record. It
Yes.
sounds like a live taping. Um, but I think by adding the extra vocal harmonies and some of the textures and Pedro's fiddle playing and stuff, it kind of knits everything together. And it's funny, Green Door is the very first recording studio I worked in with Randolph Leap back in, must have been about 2010.
Right.
And we were not ready for it. Like the band had never actually all been in the same room together. Um,
Wow.
'Cause Yeah, because we'd done gigs in different lineups and stuff, and we'd never actually all played together. But we got this chance. It was like a demo development fund from Creative Scotland that we were lucky enough to be part of, to go into Green Door and spend a few days. But um, and I loved it. But I was so stressed and intimidated and out of my depth at that age and at that experience level, that I've kind of always wanted to go back, and I finally felt ready to
Yeah.
go in and try again.
To make a return. It's
Yeah.
interesting. I'm reading a book at the moment about Talk Talk, the band Talk Talk,
Mm,
and
mhm.
when they were recording, particularly Spirit of Eden, Mark Hollis wanted just what you're talking about, live musicians, and someone described it as almost live sampling because he got all these different, fantastic, some of them session musicians, some of them playing with other bands to come in and put down their track, and then they would use them in the album. But the important thing to him was it was analog and it was real, and it wasn't, he kind of shunned synthesizers in any way. In that way, it's an interesting read.
Well, it's also a thing of not wanting to do the same thing twice. So
Yeah,
like, the last single I put out was a very synth heavy uh, track. And then the previous album was recorded in a totally different way,
yeah,
where most of the parts were overdubbed on top of each other. And there's benefits to every approach. But yeah, with these songs, I'd written them on piano, and there was just a certain feel that I thought would work well on analog.
and in terms of the writing of songs, do you have them written before you take them into the?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, they were all fully written and demoed. So I make demos at home where I fumble my way through playing bass lines and drums and various parts. But then we rehearsed them with the band, and they do change and evolve. And particularly Pete and Cami have a really good ear for arrangement, so they're quite good at saying, "Well, actually, do we need a second chorus here, or um, is there something we can do?" They're really good at like chord inversions, which I'm not a very theoretical musician, but they're quite good at like, oh, this is a C7 chord, but why don't we put the E in the bass rather than the C in the bass? And it's
Right.
little touches like that can kind of transform the songs. And we actually recorded 13 songs, but only 10 made it onto the record. And I knew that was probably going to be the case, but the ones that I thought would get jettisoned weren't the ones that ended up being jettisoned, because some of the songs that I thought they're maybe it's worth recording them, but they might not make it onto the record. Actually, by the time we'd rehearsed them up as a band, they'd kind of developed into something slightly different and better than they were on my home demos. So yeah, the songs do transform. But in terms of like the lyrics, the chords, the melodies, the basic structure, it's all there beforehand.
And going to the lyrics, one of the great joys of listening to your music is listening to the lyrics. Some of my favorites. Are you ever chuffed when you write a great line or rhyme? Well, because I sometimes when I'm listening to it, I went, "Oh, that's good."
I don't know. Yeah, I've got my favorites, I guess. Yeah, and like it's songs songs are written in different ways. Sometimes they sort of arrive fully formed, but increasingly these days I've got a notes document on my phone that just has lots of little snippets of lyrics, and quite a few of them from this record. It was almost like a little jigsaw puzzle of going through and going, oh well, I like that line, and then here's another line that was written months later about a different topic, stemmed from a different source of inspiration, but it's finding ways to actually like find some common ground between the different lyrics and piece them together into something that is at least semi-coherent, I guess.
I was wondering, I may have asked you this before, apologies if I have, but do you have songwriters and maybe even other writers who kind of inspire you or you admire?
Yeah, I mean, like Bob Dylan's my number one. I'm not certainly not comparing myself to Dylan. Um, but yeah, he his way with words and melody actually, like, everyone talks about Dylan as a lyricist, but actually, like, he said it himself, like the number of cover versions there are of his songs like demonstrates that it's
Yeah,
not just about the words. Like, he's got an incredible ear for melody as well. um and yeah, his music hits the sweet spot for me of like um word play. you know Not, it doesn't always have to make literal sense, but there's a logic to the way he uses language, um, that appeals to me. There's a poetry to it.
yeah,
Um, I think, yeah, people often talk about like humor in my lyrics, which obviously is a big part of it. But I'm not a fan of out and out comedy lyrics.
yeah.
Um, I struggle with things that are too novelty, and I've probably strayed into that at times. But yeah, I like musicians that can incorporate a bit of that. I think like Neil Hannon from the Divine Comedy would be an example.
Yeah.
Michael Hurley, um, Stephen Merritt from the Magnetic Fields,
Yeah,
Jenny Lewis from Rilo Kiley, people like that.
yeah. All fantastic records and musicians. In a moment, we're going to hear the title track of Bring On the Apathy. But before we do that, is there any Randolph Sleep news to tell?
Yeah, there is. I feel like I should be saying this more often and more publicly, because I got a radio play for one of the singles from the new record, and the DJ said, Adam Ross, formerly of Randolph Sleep. I was like, no, 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 we're still very much alive. We're making a new record at the moment. We're about halfway through. It is taking quite a long time. Like, we work at a slower rate these days, and we are less active than we used to be. But no, we've got a gig in August, and we're playing Letham Nights in Letham in Fife. We're thinking about maybe getting something organised in Glasgow or Edinburgh before the end of the year. We actually got asked to play a wedding recently, um, and the bride and groom were fans of the band, so put in a few requests, and it was some kind of older songs that we hadn't played in a long time. So we actually ended up playing 26 songs.
My goodness.
So we were thinking, while we're back in the zone, we maybe should play a few more live gigs. But there's a lot of kids have arrived
Yeah.
amongst band members and stuff now. So yeah,
You played 26 songs at the wedding.
yeah, yeah. We
I,
did two sets. Yeah.
I think they were just getting married so that you could basically play a gig for them.
Fair play. At least they didn't ask us to do covers. That's always the fear when you get asked to play a wedding. Are they going to ask us to do like Brown Eyed Girl and 500 Miles and stuff? We don't really do covers.
Uh, are there any Adam Ross live dates we should check coming up?
Loads.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. Um, so this is going out mid-June.
Yes.
I'm supporting Norman Blake from Teenage Fan Club in
Fantastic.
July. We're doing a little trio of gigs, Glasgow, Aberdeen, and Montrose, which I'm really excited about. Um, I was round at Norman's house the other day because he's asked me to join him for a few songs. So it was as a long time fan of Teenage Fan Club, it was lovely to chat to him and sit and sing along on some Teenage Fan Club songs. We're doing a Big Star cover as well. He let me hear some mixes from the new Teenage Fan Club album, so that was
Oh,
a
wow.
really lovely day. So we've got a gig in London, but that'll be in the distant past by the time this goes out. But yeah, Glasgow, Old Hairdressers, Aberdeen, Lemon Tree, and Montrose Playhouse. Um, in the summer, I'm taking a bit of time off. I'm going away on holiday. And then I'm doing the Under Canvas Festival in Inverness. And then there's a bunch of dates in September and October. I'm going across the UK. So
Um,
some English dates as well.
where's the best place for people to kind of keep up with all news, all things Adam Ross?
Um, I guess social media, Instagram tends to be the main one I use these days. But yeah, Facebook, Instagram. I've got a website. And I should give a special plug to we're doing a full band gig in Glasgow at the Glad Cafe in September. Can't remember what, 19th maybe? 19th of September, I believe.
I will
So
let
that'll
people
be the
know.
full band,
Fantastic.
backing vocalists, the whole shebang.
Excellent. Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise, no, thank you. Keep up the good work.
And this is Adam Ross, and bring on the apathy.